The sun was just clearing the horizon when I realized the nightmare had begun. That first moment when I saw the amber vial roll off the tray and shatter against the concrete with a sickening crack that echoed like a verdict. I'd come outside to meet my neighbor HOA Karen on her meticulously trimmed lawn, ready to negotiate after the HOA board's latest ultimatum threatened to fine us for an unauthorized medical device, perched on our porch. In that instant, I felt my stomach drop as she lifted the vial high. Her expression twisted with smug triumph, and flung it down as though pitching garbage into a dumpster. The insulin spilled across the drive, a crimson stain against the gray, and I knew then that this was no mere HOA dispute, it was criminal. My son, just 14, needed that insulin. I pictured him waking with labored breathing, his eyes flicking open to confusion and fear, and I felt rage ignite in my chest like a flare. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Instead of sympathy or hesitation, Karen's smirk widened as neighbors peered through curtains and cell phone cameras flickered to life. She even courted the spotlight, raising a finger as if addressing a jury. "Rules are rules," she proclaimed, her voice loud enough to carry across the cul-de-sac. The shock settled in my bones. This monster was about to ruin my child's life over petty bylaws. Only hours later, the counterattack began. I tracked down the HOA minutes from the past 2 years, uncovering a pattern of selective enforcement: handicap ramps in front of other homes left untouched, solar panels across the street ignored. Yet my son's insulin cooler was deemed an eyesore. I gathered affidavits from every neighbor who'd been bullied by Karen's tyrannical edicts, stacking evidence until the HOA board chair's name trembled on the page. Beneath the layers of intimidation, I discovered a truth. Karen's personal vendetta against my family had nothing to do with property values. Her own mother had suffered from diabetes, and in twisted projection, Karen stopped at nothing to punish us for the community burden she imagined us to be. I felt vindicated when I obtained the security footage showing her went out of her way to confiscate the cooler on a rainy morning, her golf cart idling like an executioner's carriage. She'd seized the insulin, refused to return it, and celebrated her petty triumph with a cold laugh. The evidence was undeniable. A malicious act of endangerment and intimidation. The confrontation that followed was volcanic. I confronted Karen at the next HOA meeting, stepping up to the podium with trembling confidence as I laid out the documented abuses, the falsified complaints, and the broken vial of insulin. My voice rang with outrage. "You endangered my son's life for a parking decal and a trimmed hedge you don't even maintain." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's red face crested like a storm, and she sputtered denials, but the board attorney raised an eyebrow at the footage and the signed statements from doctors and neighbors. That's when I dropped the final bombshell. I'd consulted our family physician, and with a legal letter in hand, I confirmed that withholding insulin was felony assault. I watched Karen's facade crumble as the board president turned away. The HOA attorney cleared his throat, and someone whispered, "This is beyond bylaws." The tension cracked like thunder as the president called for an immediate vote to revoke Karen's privileges and submit the evidence to local authorities. Cameras caught Karen's stunned expression, her bravado drained, replaced by panic as she whispered into her phone, "What do I do?" But there was no rescue from this reckoning. In the aftermath, the real twist surfaced. Just as Karen's arrest warrant was being drafted, her own past came to light. A neighbor uncovered that she'd been involved in a similar incident years ago, disposing of a contractor's critical medication over a permit violation. Yet she paid a fine and escaped any criminal charge. Now, with new legal standards and an outraged community backing me, prosecutors saw a pattern of deliberate harm. Karen found herself facing not only misdemeanor charges but a felony indictment for reckless endangerment. The story exploded on social media, with locals sharing my son's story under the hashtag #InsulinJustice, rallying support for stricter HOA oversight. Donations poured in for my legal fund, and families across the county came forward with their own horror stories of HOA abuse. In a final blow to her reputation, the HOA board expelled Karen permanently, and the county jail denied bail given the risk she posed. The twist was bittersweet. The very woman who'd once lorded over us, lecturing on community standards, was now behind bars, shackled by the rules she weaponized. Yet from that bitterness sprang hope. The final act unfolded at a community forum I organized, where doctors, legal experts, and ordinary families gathered to rewrite the HOA charter, inserting safeguards for medical devices and civil rights clauses that would prevent another Karen from wreaking havoc. My son, his face still faintly pale from the trauma, stood beside me and read the opening clause. No board member may endanger a resident's health or safety under any circumstances. Applause thundered through the hall, tears glistening in eyes that had known fear and injustice. As the new bylaws were ratified, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Our neighborhood had been scarred, but we had forged a stronger, kinder community in the flames of conflict. We ended the forum with a simple question inked on placards around the room. What would you do if your child's life was on the line? I urged every family to share their thoughts online. Right or wrong to fuel a conversation about power, responsibility, and compassion. Because sometimes the bitterest struggles yield the sweetest victories, and the only way to honor those who suffer is to ensure their stories ignite change. Now, as I look back on that shattered vial and the hill I climbed to bring Karen to justice, I know this truth. When one mother stands up, 100 voices will rise. So tell me, reader, what would you do? My hands still tremble as I replay that day over and over. But the real work began afterward, repairing the trust that Karen shattered and rebuilding our neighborhood's soul. In the weeks that followed her arrest, hospitals cleared my son for discharge, and I held him close in the sterile room, tears slipping down my cheeks as he smiled weakly and whispered, "I knew you'd save me." The relief was electric, but I refused to let gratitude lull me into complacency. I organized a series of neighborhood gatherings, informal potlucks on my front lawn where families shared their fears and hopes under strings of soft glowing lights. We told stories of petty fines and whispered threats that had gone unchallenged for years. Under that canopy of lantern light and clinking plates, I saw hardened faces soften as neighbors realized they weren't alone. A retired teacher named Maria spoke of the day Karen fined her for hanging laundry in her own backyard. A young couple admitted they'd hidden their toddler's swing set after receiving a cease and desist letter. Each confession was a brick in the wall. We built together an unbreakable barrier against future tyranny. Meanwhile, the HOA charter sat on the board table, torn pages and handwritten amendments testifying to our revolt. We drafted clauses guaranteeing immunity for essential medical devices, protecting handicap-accessible structures, and creating an appeal process with real teeth. Any resident could petition the county if they felt targeted. I didn't stop there. I spearheaded a watchdog committee of volunteers to audit every complaint for bias and to log each board decision in a public registry. Transparency became our mantra, and rumors of secret meetings evaporated under the sunlight of shared accountability. Slowly, the scar of Karen's cruelty healed as new bylaws took effect, and the county sheriff's department partnered with us for quarterly reviews. The prosecutor's office announced they'd filed a felony indictment for reckless endangerment, citing the Insulin incident as a textbook case of assault with a deadly weapon. Newspapers ran editorials calling it a watershed moment for HOA governance, and my phone buzzed with messages from families across the state asking how we'd done it. I answered each one, pouring our blueprint into emails and phone calls, unwilling to keep this hard-won knowledge to myself. One afternoon, as I walked past the shattered vial still sealed in an evidence bag displayed at the community center, my son grabbed my hand and guided me toward a wall painted with the new HOA logo, an oak tree encircled by hands. Beneath it, he'd scrawled in sticky note letters, "Our home, our rights." I hugged him tight, overwhelmed by how far we'd come from that first morning of terror. Yet even as a sense of triumph glowed in my chest, I reminded myself that vigilance was the price of freedom. We scheduled workshops with civil rights attorneys, teaching residents how to document harassment and file complaints. The local legal aid society offered pro bono counsel, and doctors volunteered to verify medical device needs without fear of retaliation. Our watchdog committee met monthly at the library, where minutes were live-streamed to every household in the zip code. At the first anniversary of Karen's arrest, we held a commemorative ceremony in the town square. Children released white balloons while neighbors shared speeches about courage and community. I spoke last, my voice steady as I recounted that crack of glass when insulin spilled, but this time I ended with hope. We turned a moment of grave danger into a movement for justice. Applause thundered, and for one fleeting second I felt as powerful as the law itself. As autumn crept in, our story spread beyond county lines. A state senator invited me to testify before a legislative committee drafting an HOA reform bill. I stood at the dais in the Capitol Rotunda, the weight of every neighbor's hopes on my shoulders, and spoke of the cost when bylaws are weaponized against the vulnerable. My testimony, grounded in our experiences and sealed by legal precedent, became the cornerstone of a bill that passed unanimously, earning the nickname Insulin Justice Act. Later, I watched in disbelief as the governor signed it into law, declaring that no HOA should wield bylaws to harm health or safety. The law required training for board members and granted residents the right to override punitive fines with citizen referenda. It even mandated that offending board members could be removed by popular vote if found guilty of targeting a neighbor. When I returned to our neighborhood that evening, I found our cul-de-sac bathed in lamplight, children playing tag while elders sat on porches sipping cider. The world felt at peace. Yet I knew that one day another Karen might rise, someone who sees rules as weapons rather than safeguards. So I remain vigilant, chairing our watchdog committee and mentoring new board members in empathy and fairness. My son thrives on his insulin regimen now, his laughter ringing through the halls of our home where once fear reigned. And every time I pass by that wooden board with dumped insulin paid the price, I remember that justice demands action, community demands courage, and compassion demands we never look away. Now I turn to you, reader. In a world of bylaws and boundaries, what would you risk to protect those you love? Share your thoughts, right or wrong, and help us write the next chapter in safeguarding our homes and hearts.